My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 40 years old, a senior partner at Harrow and Beckman, a firm known for sustainable architecture and civic design. Tonight, my father, Douglas Whitmore, retires after 40 years as CEO of Whitmore Industries. I'm seated alone at table 18. My brothers, Andrew and Caleb, stand confidently beside him on stage. To my sons, he says into the microphone, his voice strong, deliberate, I owe everything. My daughter never had what it takes for real business. The room erupts in applause. I don't speak. I don't cry. I stand up, calm and steady, and carry a silver-wrapped box toward the stage. My final gift to him, before I tell you what was inside that box, and what happened after he opened it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been dismissed by someone who should have seen your potential from the start? If that question stirs something in you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if stories like this resonate, stories about quiet strength, family judgment, and earning back your place, go ahead and subscribe. The first time I understood what I was in that hour, it was a Sunday dinner, pot roast, soft music from the speakers, and my father at the head of the table like always. Andrew and Caleb sat on either side of him, leaning forward with the kind of practiced interest they thought made them men. My mother moved quietly between the kitchen and the table, refilling glasses before anyone had to ask. I remember asking a question. I don't even remember the exact words, only that it had something to do with inventory turnover, a phrase I'd seen in one of my father's business reports and spent hours trying to understand. I thought maybe, if I asked the right question, I'd be let in, not all the way, just enough to matter. Douglas didn't even look at me. He laughed, not cruelly, just conclusively. Claire, he said, with a kind of amused condescension only men like him could perfect. Why don't you go help your mother with dessert? This is business. There wasn't silence afterward. The conversation continued without pause, as if I hadn't spoken at all, as if I'd never been at the table. That was the night I understood I was in the room, but never in the frame. My father built Whitmore Industries from nothing. He was proud of reminding us. A scholarship kid from Trenton who clawed his way into boardrooms and bank accounts. He believed in legacy, in structure, in hard numbers. He believed in sons. And I, his only daughter, was an afterthought. Not unloved. Exactly. Just misfiled. My mother, Elaine, saw things differently. Before she married him, she taught literature at a private college upstate. After Andrew was born, she gave up the classroom, but never gave up the habit of noticing. She noticed when I spent hours sketching buildings with pens borrowed from her desk. She noticed when I constructed tiny towns from cereal boxes and glue. She never called them toys. She sat with me and asked where the windows should go. Your father builds things that last, she said once, smoothing the tape down on the roof of a cardboard library. But you build things that speak. She didn't say it loudly. In that house, quietness was survival. But she meant it. She was the only one who asked what I saw when I looked at the world. The only one who treated the answer like it mattered. After that Sunday, I stopped trying to sit closer. I brought plates in, took them out. I listened, and I learned to keep my questions to myself. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew no one at that table planned to hear it. I never asked for more than what my brothers were given. But even that, in our house, was too much. By the time I was 14, it was clear I didn't just match Andrew and Caleb. I outpaced them. While they coasted through school with decent enough grades and the weight of assumed futures, I kept my head down and did the work no one asked of me. I entered state competitions in math, in engineering, in architecture, won most of them. I never bragged. I didn't need to. The certificates were stacked neatly in a drawer in my room, unacknowledged, unframed. At the family table, Caleb was still praised for making varsity swim, despite being a bench warmer. Andrew got a full 5-minute applause for bringing home a C+ in calculus, because that class is brutal. When I quietly mentioned that I'd won the regional award for my model of a net zero energy school campus, my father didn't even look up. That's not real business, he said, still reading. It's just another art project. It became a pattern. Me building something quietly. Him knocking it over with a sentence. No yelling, no cruelty. just the soft erosion of being invisible. My mother tried. She kept pushing him, gently, always gently, to come to my award ceremonies, my design showcases, my scholarship interviews. Sometimes, he'd promise, but there was always a last-minute meeting, a sudden obligation, something more deserving of his time. She never told me to give up, but her voice grew smaller over the years, and by the time I turned 16, her body did too. The diagnosis came fast: breast cancer, late stage, the kind of phrase that doesn't leave room for options. There was a hospice nurse in our living room by fall. She died in October, quietly, just like everything else she did. The house didn't fall apart after she passed. It didn't shift. It just became colder, like she'd been the only source of gravity. And without her, we were all just floating in place, at her funeral. I stood near the garden she had always cared for, the air raw and too bright. People kept saying she had been gentle, gracious, devoted, as if those were the only adjectives allowed. They said them like compliments, like apologies. And then, as I passed the side porch, I heard my father's voice, low, distant, not meant for me. At least the boys can carry on the business, he said to my uncle. That's what matters in the end. He didn't say it with malice. That would have made it easier. He said it like it was fact, like I hadn't been standing 10 feet away with a Cornell scholarship letter folded in my coat pocket. I didn't interrupt. I didn't cry. I just memorized the words, like I'd memorized so many others. When I left for college a year later, I packed quietly. I took my sketchbooks, my models, the only photograph I had of my mother and me, her arm wrapped around my shoulder, half laughing at something I had said. I left behind the trophies, the ribbons, the clippings. I already knew he hadn't read them. Cornell was the first place where no one asked if I was someone's daughter. No one knew who Douglas Whitmore was. I arrived with my name, my portfolio, and nothing else. I graduated valedictorian, published research on adaptive architecture, interned at a firm that didn't care about last names, only whether your designs held up under pressure. I sent home every official notice, just in case he might want to keep track. He never responded, not even a text. At some point, I stopped expecting anything. But that's the thing about disappointment. It doesn't need a stage. It builds itself over time, brick by silent brick, until one day you realize you're standing inside it. And the exit, that's the part no one tells you. You have to draw it yourself. The summer after I graduated from Cornell, a formal envelope arrived from Whitmore Industries. It was typed, not handwritten, addressed to Miss Claire Whitmore, and signed by someone from HR I'd never met. Inside was an offer: entry-level analyst, starting salary, full benefits, with the opportunity to observe high-level strategy. A polite way of saying I'd be sorting documents behind Andrew or Caleb. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, my father called. His voice was neutral, rehearsed. "We've made space for you here. You'll start next quarter." No question, no curiosity. I told him I'd already accepted a position. Silence. Then, "Clipped where Harrow and Beckman," I said. "They specialize in sustainable urban design." A pause. Long enough to carry weight. "You're going to draw buildings?" he asked. "They're not drawings," I said quietly. "They're structures that reduce emissions, generate energy, respond to human needs." "Claire." He cut in with a familiar tone. "You've always been creative, but this isn't a career. It's glorified art." I remember exactly where I was. Standing in the corner of my sublet in Brooklyn, a single fan spinning overhead, resumes still stacked on the table. I stood still as his words landed, steady and surgical. "You'll be back in a year," he added, "when it doesn't work out." Then he hung up. I started work the following Monday. Harrow and Beckman was nothing like Whitmore Industries. There were no corner offices, no mahogany desks. We worked out of a converted warehouse in Red Hook, open floor, exposed beams, coffee strong enough to burn through steel. I started as a junior associate, making site maps, calculating light angles, sitting in on public hearings for low-income housing proposals. No one called me a Whitmore. No one cared what I'd turned down. They only cared if I showed up prepared, if my numbers held up, if I knew when to speak and when to listen. I learned fast. By year 2, I was led on a zoning revision project. By year 4, I'd filed my first patent for an integrated solar shading system. At year 5, I became senior project lead on Harborlight, our most ambitious mixed-use development yet. A waterfront complex that combined public housing, green retail space, and community centers. Built from recycled steel and powered entirely off-grid. It was risky, expensive, politically inconvenient. It won the Hammond Award for Innovation in Design. When the news broke, I sent no announcement home, but my name ran in every industry publication that month. The press photos showed me standing on site. Helmet, blueprints, steel structure behind me. I looked nothing like the girl who had stood at the dinner table asking about inventory turnover. A week later, my father forwarded the article to Andrew. No comment. Just the link. He never called. I did hear one thing. From Caleb. Over a holiday dinner I almost skipped. Dad says you got lucky, he muttered, cutting into a slice of ham. Says the award is political. I nodded. I didn't argue. There was no point. By then, I was out-earning both of them combined. I didn't say that either. I didn't need to. Success in my family had always been defined by proximity to my father. The closer you stood to him, the more valid you became. But I had stopped trying to stand near him a long time ago. I wasn't back. I wasn't asking for approval. I was building something else entirely. The envelope was heavier than it needed to be. Cream cardstock, gold embossing, the kind of weight you associate with weddings or courtroom summons. My name, Miss Claire Whitmore, written in careful serif across the front. Inside, the invitation to a black tie gala at the Ellington Hotel honoring Douglas Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Industries, on the occasion of his retirement after 40 years of excellence. 3 weeks' notice. RSVP required. I sat with it unopened for an hour, just turning it over in my hands. My father had always liked spectacle, corner offices, newspaper features, 4-course meals served on time. This, I assumed, would be no different. Speeches, applause. His sons flanking him like trophies. What did he expect from me? I left the envelope on the kitchen counter and went to work. That night, Ryan noticed it while pouring wine. You gonna go? He asked. Casual but not unkind. I didn't answer right away. We had been together 2 years, long enough for him to know that the Whitmore name didn't mean inheritance. It meant erasure. It's his moment, I finally said. He built something. People will show up to clap. Ryan sat down across from me. And you, I haven't decided. Later that week, I met Natalie for lunch. 15 years of friendship made her the only person besides Ryan who knew every inch of this story. She didn't sugarcoat it. You know what this is? Right, she said, stabbing at her salad. He wants to show off the sons. Maybe mention the daughter in passing. If there's time left after dessert. I'm not going for him, I said. Then why go at all? I didn't answer right away. But the thought had already started forming. Something quiet. Something sharp. That evening, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were clippings, photographs, old letters, my acceptance to Cornell, a feature on the Harborlight project, my license, framed and yellowing around the edges. I hadn't planned to collect these things. I had just never thrown them away. At the bottom was a sealed envelope in my mother's handwriting. For Claire. It read, when she needs reminding of her worth. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I laid everything out, meticulously, deliberately. Press clippings, diplomas, photos of my builds, the Hammond Award medal. I loaded a USB drive with a presentation I had created for an international sustainability conference, my voice narrating over footage of Harborlight. Overlaid with data and timelines, permits and sketches. I titled it What It Takes. Then I found a small white box, sturdy, clean. I wrapped it in silver paper, added a navy ribbon, his company colors, and on top, a single card from your biggest failure. 2 nights before the gala. I left the box on the table and stared at it for an hour. I wasn't angry, not exactly, but I was done being a name left out of introductions. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a performance. It was documentation, a record of everything he'd chosen not to see. The Ellington Hotel had that kind of lighting that flattened everyone's skin, even under makeup. I arrived just before 7, walking past the velvet ropes and the step and repeat banner printed with the Whitmore Industries logo. The room shimmered with dark suits and practiced smiles. Strings played in the background. The ice in the champagne glasses hadn't started to melt. No one expected me to come. Andrew spotted me first. His expression was somewhere between surprise and concern. Caleb gave a polite nod. Their wives greeted me with the distance people use when they're not sure what version of you they're supposed to acknowledge. My father was across the room, deep in conversation with a small group of investors. He saw me, offered a nod, said, "Claire, you made it," like I'd shown up to a quarterly meeting 5 minutes late. Then his eyes slid to my outfit, a fitted navy suit with clean lines and no softness. "Finally dressing professionally," he added, as if I'd spent the last decade in denim and defiance. "Congratulations on your retirement." "Dad," I said flatly. Measured. "We'll talk later," he said, already turning toward someone else. My table. Number 19 was near the kitchen doors, with distant cousins and mid-level managers. The head table was full, Douglas flanked by Andrew and Caleb, their wives on either side. There was no place for me there. There never had been. The box sat quietly beside my chair. Dinner came and went. I didn't taste the food. When the lights dimmed and the screen lowered, I felt my body stiffen like I'd known this would happen, and still hoped I was wrong. The tribute video played over sweeping orchestral music, Douglas shaking hands with governors, breaking ground with gold shovels, standing proudly between his sons at the opening of the Atlanta campus. Little League clips of Andrew, graduation photos of Caleb, award ceremonies, magazine covers, always three people, always framed in power. I appeared once, a family portrait from when I was 10, before my mother got sick, before I started understanding what it meant to be optional. The video ended. Applause followed, loud and warm. Then he stood. Douglas Whitmore stepped to the podium like it was built for him. He adjusted his tie, smoothed the edge of the lectern, paused just long enough to command attention. 40 years ago, he began. I started this company with a loan, a vision, and no safety net. What we've built since then is not just a business, it's a legacy. He thanked the board, his legal team, longtime employees, clients who'd flown in for the occasion. Then his voice shifted, became personal. "What I'm most proud of," he said, "is not the buildings, not the revenue. It's the next generation, my sons, Andrew and Caleb." Applause again. "They've proven they have what it takes: leadership, judgment, the instinct to carry this company forward." He scanned the room, found me, held eye contact just long enough to make it feel rehearsed. "Unlike my daughter," he said, "who chose a different path. One that, frankly, doesn't prepare her for the realities of business." A quiet laugh passed through the room. Polite, discomforted, quickly silenced. "I used to worry," he continued, "that she didn't have what it takes. Now I understand. She simply chose not to be part of this world. Some people aren't built for real business. It wasn't personal. That's what made it worse." He said it like a market forecast, impersonal, factual. The applause at the end of his speech was long and standing. Everyone rose. I did not. Instead, I reached for the box. I stood, walked toward the stage. My heels hit the floor like punctuation marks. Conversations trailed off. People turned. My father's smile faltered as I stepped up the 3 stairs and approached him. "Claire," he said. Low, warning, "This isn't the time." "I disagree," I said, placing the box in his hands. His brows drew in. "What is this?" "It's from your biggest failure," I said. "Open it when I'm gone." And then I turned. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I walked past the head table, past my brothers, past the men who used to call me Doug's daughter like it meant less, through the ballroom doors and into the hotel lobby, where no one clapped. I didn't need them to. I had already left what needed to be said, right there, in his hands. Douglas Whitmore stood at the podium, still holding the silver-wrapped box like it might be part of the decor. His fingers curled around the ribbon, unsure whether to set it down or open it. The room, once buzzing with conversation, had gone quiet. One of those silences that feels too sharp to be accidental. Someone coughed. Someone else sat down too quickly. He stayed there, Still, until Andrew stepped forward. "Dad," he said, low enough for the microphone to miss. "We can do this later." Douglas shook his head, just once, and slowly began to untie the ribbon. It slid off with the soft sound of friction. Then the tape, then the paper. He moved carefully, not because of nerves, but because every movement was being watched. The box inside was white, unmarked. He opened it. The first item was my Cornell diploma, summa cum laude, framed, clean, undeniable. He looked at it longer than anyone expected. Then came the architecture license. He paused again, reading every line, as if suddenly aware that these were not symbolic gestures. These were credentials, proof. The next item, the Hammond Award Medal. He turned it over in his hand, as if testing its weight. The lights above the podium caught the edge of the engraving. Then the USB, labeled in my handwriting, "What It Takes." He stared at it like it might explode. For a moment, it looked like he wouldn't continue. But he did. Next was a manila envelope, thicker than the others. Inside, financial statements, tax returns, a breakdown of Harbor Light's construction costs and savings projections, grants awarded, and sustainability benchmarks met, numbers, his language. Then, near the bottom, a smaller envelope, yellowed slightly, familiar handwriting across the front for Claire, when she needs reminding of her worth. He froze, for the first time. Something cracked. It was Elaine's writing. He knew it instantly. He didn't open the letter. Not yet. He set it down gently, like it might bruise. Then reached in for the final item, a single note card. He read it silently. Once, then again. His face shifted, not with anger, not embarrassed, but something more dangerous to a man like him. Recognition. His lips moved, but no words came. Then he cleared his throat, picked up the microphone. He stopped. The mic caught the dry rasp of breath. "I believe that concludes the formal portion of the evening. No closing speech, no final toast, just that." He stepped back, leaving the items on the podium, each one positioned like an exhibit. Then he sat down, alone, at the head table, where no one met his eyes. Andrew stood again, forced a smile, and thanked everyone for coming. "Please enjoy dessert. The bar will remain open." The band started playing something upbeat, too fast, too loud, but most people didn't hear it. They were still looking at the box, at him. Douglas didn't move. He opened Elaine's letter. Read it all the way through, folded it once, then placed it over the Hammond medal, like it belonged there. Caleb approached cautiously. "What was in the box?" he asked, voice low. Douglas answered without looking up. "Everything I never bothered to see. I didn't cry on the drive home, not even when I pulled into the garage and turned off the engine. The silence wrapped around me like fog. The box was no longer in my hands, but its weight hadn't left. It was in my chest, in the stillness, in the parts of me I had trained for years not to feel." My phone lit up before I even reached the elevator. A message from Andrew. "What did you give him?" Then Caleb. "He looks like he's seen a ghost." "You okay?" I didn't reply. That night, I left my phone on silent and slept in clothes I hadn't meant to wear to bed. When I woke, there were 6 missed calls from my father's number. No voicemails, just missed calls. Each one unanswered, unread. It wasn't until the third night that the email came. 2:13 a.m. Subject: I was wrong. The body was brief. Claire. I saw everything on the USB. I was wrong. When you're ready, I'd like to talk. Dad. No signature block, no Whitmore Industries logo, just 12 words. And even so, it was the most direct apology I had ever received from him. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I booked a flight to Singapore that morning. The project had been pending, a consultation on a sustainable renovation for a luxury hotel chain. It wasn't urgent, but it was far. 7,000 miles of ocean and glass and silence. It was enough. For 3 days, I worked nonstop, reviewed zoning laws, met with engineers, walked through construction sites wearing a hard hat and someone else's name badge. I kept the time difference in place like a wall, refusing to check texts, ignoring all calls from home. It wasn't avoidance. Not exactly. It was preservation. On the 5th day, during a lunch break, my phone buzzed, not with a number, with a name. Caleb. I didn't pick up, but the message came through. He's changed something. It read, "You should know." A few minutes later, a second message, this time with a link. I clicked. Whitmore Industries announces launch of Green Architecture Division. The press release was polished, professional, but the subtext was clear. Douglas Whitmore, who once dismissed sustainable design as a niche trend, was postponing his retirement to personally oversee a new environmental initiative. The announcement included quotes about climate responsibility, long-term investment, and the future of urban development. At the bottom, a paragraph caught my eye. This initiative was inspired in part by the recent work of independent architect Claire Whitmore, whose Harborlight project has received global recognition for its innovation in renewable construction and equitable design. No comment from me had been requested, no permission granted, but my name was there, in print, in his company's press materials, as if the last 20 years hadn't happened exactly the way they did. 15 minutes later, my phone rang again. Andrew. I let it go to voicemail. Then I got a text. He's meeting with consultants. He's redesigning factory layouts. He's quoting your video, word for word. I stared at the screen, then at the sky outside the cafe window. Singapore was warm that day. Still, I could see the reflection of myself in the glass. Eyes tired, mouth still. There was no satisfaction in it, no vindication, just the quiet disorientation of watching a man rewrite his legacy with pieces of yours, and wondering if that counts as recognition or theft. I didn't reply, not to them, and not to him. 2 weeks after I returned to Boston, a package appeared outside my apartment door. No advance notice, no sender label, just a shipping receipt with my father's name, and the return address of his house, our old house, still printed at the top in faded ink. I left it untouched for a day, then another. By the third morning, the weight of it became harder to ignore than whatever might be inside. I opened it carefully. No wrapping, no theatrics, just a set of blueprints, rolled and secured with a black ribbon, and a single envelope placed on top. My name was written on the front, in his handwriting, not a typed label, not initials, Claire. I opened the letter first. It wasn't long, but it was something I'd never seen from him before. Something not built for performance or optics. There was no defense, no redirection, just this, Claire. These past weeks have been a time of painful but necessary reflection. The box you gave me, your mother would have called it a reckoning, and she would have been right. I failed you, not just as a father, but as a man. I saw you through a lens so narrow it filtered out everything that didn't look like me. I mistook your path as a rejection of mine, instead of a refinement. Your mother saw what I didn't, and I'm sorry. The enclosed plans are early, incomplete. They're a gesture, not a claim, a community center, to be built in Brookville, her hometown, the place she always wanted to give back to. If you have the time and if you're willing, I would be honored to have your input, or your silence. I'll accept either, with respect and regret. Dad. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I didn't trust it. I unrolled the blueprints on the dining table. The design was rough, hand-drawn, imperfect, but there were notes in the margins, questions he'd scribbled for himself. Natural light optimization, solar gain modeling multi-use rooms for youth programming. It wasn't just a building. It was something else. It was an attempt. Brookville wasn't far. A quiet town with wooden porches and peeling paint, where my mother had been raised by a schoolteacher and a nurse. She used to talk about it sometimes, in small memories. A library with creaky floors, a lake with water too cold to swim in after September, a place that never asked her to be more than she was. She had wanted to set up a scholarship fund there, back when she still believed she had time. She mentioned it once, quietly, to my father. I remembered how he nodded, distracted, and changed the subject. And now, here was this, on my table, in my hands, a draft. I didn't respond right away. I didn't text. I didn't call. But 2 nights later, I pulled the plans back out. I studied them, marked them up, adjusted the site orientation to reduce west-facing glare, noted changes in material efficiency. highlighted places where design met memory, an atrium that mirrored the reading room my mother once loved. Then I opened my calendar, and I sent him a text. Seabreeze Cafe. Wednesday, 10:00 a.m. His response came within seconds. I'll be there. Seabreeze Cafe sat a block from the harbor, quiet on weekday mornings, the kind of place where the coffee was strong. The staff didn't hover, and no one asked personal questions. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a cappuccino, and took a seat by the window, back straight, hands folded. At exactly 10:00 a.m., my father walked in. Same suit, same watch, but something about him had shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, just a small tilt in posture, a slower pace. He looked careful, like someone who had been handed something fragile and wasn't sure how to carry it. Claire, he said, pausing at the table. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded toward the seat across from mine. Coffee black, he said. Then sat down like someone unsure if he'd be asked to leave. The silence between us wasn't hostile, it was weighted, full of things we had both run out of ways to avoid. He cleared his throat. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't either. Another pause. Then I read your notes, on the design, and they were clear, sharp, better than anything I've paid for in years. I didn't smile, just sipped my drink and waited. He let out a breath, looked past me toward the water. Your mother used to say I was writing a prophecy. I tilted my head, unsure where he was going. She said I was creating an outcome by the way I treated you, that if I kept expecting less of you, because you were a girl, you'd start expecting less of yourself. His voice was steady, but low. She told me that 3 times. The last was a month before she got sick. I brushed it off, said she was being dramatic. He turned back to face me. She wasn't. I didn't speak, I wanted to. But I knew better. Let him sit with it. I thought I was being protective, he said, that I was giving you space to figure things out. But really, I was just uncomfortable with a version of success I didn't recognize. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded paper, the note card I had written. You said I build with steel and concrete, and you build with vision and heart. He placed it on the table between us. I've built a lot of things in my life, Claire, but I've never built something that changed the way people live in a city. You did that. I looked at the card, then at him. You didn't see it, I said quietly, not because it wasn't there, but because it didn't look like you. He didn't flinch. You're right. Another pause. Then he added, you didn't get here because you're a Whitmore. You got here in spite of it. That landed harder than I expected. I looked away, not out of weakness, but because I needed a second to breathe through it. He sat still, then asked, will you consider advising the Brookville project not as a gesture? As an architect, I'll need full access to site specs, budget constraints, community input timelines. Of course. And I won't sign off on anything with your name until I believe the design is sound. Understood. I studied him, not searching for sincerity, just checking if he could hold eye contact without looking for an exit. He could. Then yes, I said. Professionally, I'll advise. He nodded once. Thank you. We didn't hug, didn't shake hands, but when we stood to leave, he stepped aside, not as a courtesy, as recognition. Professional collaboration with my father began the way most structural repairs do, slow, precise, and beneath the surface. I sent over my proposed revisions to the Brookville Center in stages. Not all at once. I didn't trust the idea of letting go that easily. He responded to each email within hours, no corrections, no power plays, just follow-up questions, requests for clarification, and, occasionally, comments like, this changes the energy flow of the space. I hadn't considered that. That was new. At meetings, he took notes. He asked about concepts he used to dismiss: circular resource modeling, LEED compliance tiers, flexible use corridors. He brought in consultants I recommended and let them speak without interruption. He didn't act like a man trying to catch up. He acted like a man learning how to stay quiet. The first time I noticed a real shift came during a site visit. We were walking the perimeter of the lot in Brookville, snow melting just enough to reveal uneven terrain, when he pointed toward a tree line and asked, what's your read on light movement through here? Not the light, not a tree problem. He used my language. trusted my eyes. Weeks passed. We sent sketches back and forth. He adjusted where I asked, never once appealed to ego or sentiment, and I, cautiously, let my guard down, until dinner. It was Caleb's idea. A small gathering at his house, nothing formal, just family. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. I arrived late on purpose. The dining table was already full, Caleb and his wife, Andrew and his fiancée, and Douglas at the far end. One empty chair was left open beside him. I sat down without a word. Dinner moved slowly. Small talk, vacation plans, a new promotion. Andrew was debating. I said little. I didn't need to. Then Rebecca, Caleb's wife, turned to me. Claire, how's the Brookville project going? I saw something online about the new solar integration. I opened my mouth to answer, but my father spoke first. Claire's redesign of the center is a structural revolution, he said, voice steady. The solar array alone will cut operational costs by nearly a third. The design is 10 years ahead of current municipal standards. The table went quiet. Caleb blinked. Andrew put down his glass. Rebecca smiled. I nodded once, unsure where to place my hands. Then Caleb added, he's not exaggerating. Dad's been in night classes for 2 months. Environmental design principles, industrial sustainability. Won't let anyone else touch the Brookville specs. Douglas didn't deny it. It's important to get it right, he said simply. It has to serve more than just its function. It has to last. Breathe. That word again. Breathe. It was something my mother used to say about architecture, about art, about parenting. He looked at me then, not with pride, not with apology, but with something steadier, something that wasn't looking for credit or asking for permission. It was the first time I felt like we were standing on level ground. After dinner, I helped clear the plates. Caleb handed me a container of leftovers, unprompted. Andrew asked about a zoning appeal on one of my projects in Tokyo. No one mentioned titles, or money, or legacy, only work, only merit. And that shift, quiet, slow, earned, felt heavier than applause. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't proving anything. I was simply being heard. The ground in Brookville was still soft from the spring thaw. Beneath the temporary stage and the ceremonial shovel line, patches of damp earth threatened to collapse under the weight of too many polished shoes. The sky held steady, pale blue, quiet. The site had been cleared weeks before, old fencing removed, soil pre-treated. Renderings of the future community center were displayed on easels along the edge of the tent. The name printed across every board, the Elaine Whitmore Community Center. It was the first time I had seen her name that large, that public. A row of folding chairs faced the platform. Local council members, journalists, a handful of residents from the nearby neighborhood, my brothers, my father. When the mayor stepped to the microphone, she kept her remarks brief, something about revitalization, the importance of education access, the beauty of shared space. Then she introduced me. I walked up without notes, not out of confidence, out of decision. The podium was cold to the touch. The microphone gave a soft, static hiss, then cleared. I looked at the audience. Small, focused, waiting. This center is a building, I began. But before it's that, it's a foundation. I let the pause sit, then continued. A foundation of care, of second chances, of remembering the people who believed in things before the rest of us knew how to name them. I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. I spoke about sustainable architecture, about a design that adapts to human need rather than demanding it to bend, about the small details, natural light, accessible entrances, spaces that could shift with time and still hold dignity. I spoke about the responsibility of building not just for now, but for those who might come later. I didn't mention my father, or our process, or what it had taken to get here. But I did say this. Every building tells a story. This one tells a story of transformation, of seeing value where others might not, and of trusting that the things we build with intention can last longer than the things we inherit. I stepped back from the podium. No applause at first, then soft, then louder. It was enough. I returned to my seat. The mayor offered a few final words and invited us to the shovel line. 6 people with silver-plated tools posed for the press. I held mine without smiling. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, my father, standing slightly apart, speaking with the mayor. He didn't gesture, didn't point toward me, but I saw his lips move. The mayor nodded slowly. Later, I asked what he said. She replied without hesitation. He told me, "My daughter taught me what really matters, and she definitely has what it takes." That was all. No big speech, no scene, just a sentence. But in the history of our family, it was a structural shift. And this time, it didn't need to be said to me, because I had already heard it at work. The reception ended quietly. People lingered for photos, handshakes, and promises to follow up. I stayed near the edge of the tent, helping the project coordinator pack up display boards. The sun had shifted by then, casting longer shadows over the freshly turned soil. I didn't expect him to come back, but he did. My father approached slowly, a small box tucked under one arm. Not the kind for blueprints or awards. Smaller, older, worn at the corners like it had lived in the back of a closet too long. "I found this last week," he said, in a storage box marked Elaine Personal. I almost missed it. He handed it to me. No ceremony. Inside was the house, the model I had built when I was 7, out of cardboard, popsicle sticks, and strips of green construction paper. The roof was lined with crinkled foil, solar panels. In my imagination, a tiny garden on top, glued too far to one side. The tape had yellowed, but it was intact. "She kept it," he said. "Even after the move, even after everything." I didn't speak. I couldn't. He cleared his throat. "She said you had vision, that you saw things before the rest of us could name them." His voice was quieter now. And she was right. I looked down at the model in my hands, fragile, asymmetrical, stubbornly intact. Then he added, "Thank you, for what I asked." Barely above a whisper. "For not giving up on architecture, on yourself." He paused. "And for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." I didn't answer, but I didn't step away either. We stood there for a while, just looking at what I'd made so many years ago, what he had finally chosen to hold. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The box I gave him at his retirement wasn't just evidence. It was a blueprint, not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, but for rebuilding, on new ground, with stronger materials, this time, with both of us willing to learn. That night didn't erase the years I spent feeling unseen, or the silence I carried through every family dinner. But it shifted something, not dramatically, quietly. My father didn't apologize with a speech, and I didn't need one. Instead, he handed me back a part of my story, acknowledging the work, the choices, and the strength he once dismissed. It wasn't approval I needed. It was true, and he finally gave it to me. If you've ever had to show someone who you are, not by arguing, but by simply standing in your own light, then maybe you know what that moment felt like. Let me know in the comments if you've ever stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And if stories like this reflect something you've lived, consider subscribing. Some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be seen.